Hello everyone, Loremaster Sotek here, and please excuse the fan running in the background, but it is very, very hot in Texas right now. We hit almost 110 degrees today, which is, I think, like 45 degrees Celsius, or maybe a little somewhere in that ballpark, but it is super duper hot. So even at night, it takes a while for everything to cool off. But in any event, I promised you guys I would make these videos, and I'm keeping my promise, which I'm trying to be better about, at least when it comes to video making. So I know a lot of us, myself included, are super duper excited about the Wood Elf DLC and free LC coming out in the future. So I thought the best thing I could do would be to essentially make a small series of videos that would basically cover all the things I think are possible. I'm not going to get too much into what I think is likely. I'm going to stick strictly, there we go, to what I think is possible. And I'm just going to do it in a really chill format. I'm not going to go super crazy on it. It's just going to be us kind of hanging out and talking, kind of like you would expect on a podcast. So, minimal editing and all that. Anyway, so the way I decided to do this is I've got quite a few things, a good batch of Legendary Lord possibilities to talk about, new heroes, new units, new mechanics. So what I wanted to do for that is split up all of those ideas and mechanics into different videos. Not in the sense that you might expect of like each one covering a category, but instead I'm going to give each video its own little group. So for instance, I want to talk about 4 Legendary Lord possibilities of the Sisters of Twilight, Ariel, Erloth, and Naiath the Prophetess. So each one of them will be in a video. And then every video will also feature an additional other character choice, 2 new possible units, and a possible new mechanic. That's kind of how I've decided to roll with this. So without too much further ado, so this video isn't a billion years long, let's go ahead and get started. I did a little poll on Twitter to kind of get the order in which I'm going to do these guys, and the winner was the Sisters of Twilight. So let's get started. For those unaware, the Sisters of Twilight are kind of one of the most interesting characters available to the Wood Elves of Athel Loren. They are a set of twins, 2 girls, named Diestra and Arahan. And kind of their big thing is that they represent yin and yang. They supposedly represent Ariel. One of them represents, Diestra represents Ariel's mercy, and Arahan represents Ariel's passion. At least that's one of the myths. Some other myths are that they're just her natural-born daughters, but Diestra represents light, or high magic, and Arahan represents dark. And there's a couple of other ways you can look at it. But they're yin and yang. That's the important bit. And they are they are my favorite of the Wood Elf characters because they're just a lot of fun. They showed up a really long time ago in the Wood Elf history, and they kind of stood in for Ariel on the council because they are her daughters. And so they kind of spoke with her authority, her voice. And they're both very good, and they're great at it because one of them will take over depending on the situation. So like during the spring and summer months, when the council and the Wood Elves and the Forest Spirits are all super amped and like really want to go to war and all this other stuff, Diestra, who is the much more passive and calm of the sisters, will be much more forward and advising caution and tempering their rage and their bloodlust and trying to keep them like cool and calm so they're not making rash, idiotic decisions. Whereas in the fall and winter months, when the Wood Elves and the Forest Spirits get really sluggish and tired and they tend to just want to like rest and not do anything, Arahan, who is the much more wild child, gets like super amped and basically becomes the hype man for the Council of Athel Loren. But how would they play? So I think there's only 2 possible ways we're going to see them, which are basically one way, but there might be a slight extension. And what I mean by that is I don't think Diestra and Arahan will be separate characters. I think that they're going to be one character, just like they were in Tabletop, because that's a really important thing of their design. So you're going to see, I think, one of 2 ways. Either they're going to be allowed on foot or they aren't. I think that's kind of the critical junction that'll depend on how their characters work. On one hand, a lot of people like having the option of characters being on foot, but at the same time, most people kind of hate foot lords. And if they put Nyastra and Arhan on foot, to have them be able to be near each other at all times, and for it not to look crazy janky, they would basically have to treat them like Skarsnik and Gobla. And their animations would probably be super involved and difficult, and a bunch of just, like, crazy nonsense. It would be, I think, kind of weird, and honestly, I hope they don't go that route. I am much more hopeful that they're going to go the tabletop route with them, where you have to essentially run them as on a mount. So basically, in tabletop, the way the Sisters of Twilight worked is that you would either take them on their Great Eagle mount, whose name was, I think, Gwendolyn something? Where is he? Gwendolyn, there we go. You have Gwendolyn, and then, or you would take them on their Forest Dragon mount, who is named Sinithar. And, Scythenhar, one of those. And basically, depending on which mount you took them on, would have different customizable options. But it allows them to be on a single model and would be a lot smoother looking and probably a lot easier, because then you don't have to deal with like all the jankiness of having a foot lord that like would be moving around, or, you know, have animations where they get charged and knocked over, and like just a bunch of like super bizarre nonsense. So what I'm really hoping is that we're going to get them just on their mount. And they'll start with Gwendolyn as their initial unlocked mount, and then later in their campaign, you'll be able to upgrade to have Scythenhar as your big scary dragon mount. So how do I think they're going to work mechanically? Well, their big thing is that they're archers. So like when you're looking at the Wood Elf characters, you know, you kind of have Orion has like his big scary spear, but he's also essentially just a greater demon. Ariel is like a big wizard that's also very large and in charge. Nyat the Prophetess is more of just your average elf-sized wizard who might have some interesting customization options. Erloth is a super fighter guy that just hangs out usually on foot, but will probably get a mount upgrade if they do right by him. And then Durthu, you know, big angry tree. Drycha, smaller angry tree. But the Sisters of Twilight are like the actual ranged, focused characters. Like Orion is good at shooting, whether it's throwing his spear or shooting a bow, but the Sisters of Twilight are all about that range game. So both of them have a magic bow, and they do two different things. So they have the Talon of Dawn and the Talon of Dusk, which you can guess which sister has which. So Nyastra, who is the white-haired, I think she's the white-haired one, the white-haired sister that represents like order and light and high magic and nobility and all this stuff, she wields the Talon of Dawn. And what the Talon of Dawn is it's basically a single-shot bolt thrower that shoots this one big booming shot that has crazy AP, hits really hard, does a fire damage, so flaming attack, and it would probably do like super anti-large, because it did multi-wounds in tabletop, which means it was good against big things. So I think she'll have an anti-large ranged attack that's just a big ol' flaming missile that she shoots out. And then I think what they'll do is they'll essentially have a bolt thrower toggle. That, you know, if you use the High Elf or Dark Elf bolt throwers, they have a little toggle button when you have them selected where they can either shoot a single shot or like a bunch of shots. I think they're going to do the exact same thing. So you're going to have the big single shot coming from the Talon of Dawn if you're using Nyastra, and then if you toggle it, you'll have Arahan shooting instead, so that Arahan will be using the Talon of Dusk. I think I said Dusk a second ago. So big single shot, Talon of Dawn. Multi-shot is the Talon of Dusk. The Talon of Dusk shoots out these really nasty, like, she shoots like these really spooky barbs that are literally crafted from like the remains of the most spiteful and angry dryads from the Wildwood. Like they basically, when they are captured or die or something, they basically take their spirit husks, aka their bodies, and like grind them up or chop them up to make specialized arrows out of them. And when Arahan fires these things, the bitterness of these dryads causes these arrows, when fired, to basically shatter into like a bunch of little shards, and then they just go and just ruin your day. Like, so the thing with the Talon of Dusk is it's supposed to not be nearly as damaging. So it doesn't, like, it has AP, but its strength is like so weak that the only reason it has AP is to make it like potentially annoying. But it has a little bit of AP, but it does very little damage, but it shoots a ton of shots. And so it would be like a swarm of shots, and they're poisonous. So they do poison damage, and they'd have that little bit of AP, and would generally just be a bad time. The next big rule that they have is called the Sisters of Twilight, which I would really like to see this implemented. I'm not 100% sure how it would work, because essentially the way it operates is that Nyastra, the Order Child, we'll call her, she wields a sword. So she's all about like blade play, and she deals bonus damage when she's fighting against the forces of destruction. Meanwhile, Arahan, who wields a spear, is the destruction child, so to speak, and she gets all of her crazy bonuses to wound against Order. I'm honestly not 100% sure how this will work, unless it'll probably be like campaign if it's campaign, I could see it working. But the way they might do it in campaign is perhaps that you'll just get buffs against those races. Because traditionally in tabletop, you wouldn't like pick one sister to fight. They would both fight in close combat. It's just that you'd have to roll them separately, because one of them got bonus to wound against Order, and one of them got bonus to wound against Destruction. So maybe that'll just be like their starting trait will be the Sisters of Twilight. So their starting trait will just be like they get notable bonus weapon strength whenever they're fighting a race from the Order group or race from the Destro group. So lucky Tomb Kings get to get to dodge that particular shot to the face, and Ogre Kingdoms as well, because those are the only two non-aligned factions. And then an ability I think would be really, really cool, and I'm curious how they would do it, would be Conjoined Destiny. This is probably the thing that the Sisters of Twilight are the most famous for, at least for people that knew them in tabletop, because Conjoined Destiny is literally a rule that makes it so that if you kill one of the Sisters of Twilight, you have to kill the other one that same phase, or else she will cause the first sister that died to be resurrected. So if you don't kill them at the same time, they won't die. They'll just keep getting back up. Now, how would they implement this? Honestly, I'm not 100% certain. I could see it being done maybe like one of a few ways. Maybe they'll have a system where, like, if they lose a certain amount of health, then they maybe they'll gain like regeneration. So maybe like when they've lost 50% of their health, they'll start regenerating until they're back up to that 50%. Or maybe if they take a certain amount of damage, they'll have like a last second heal, like the Hell Pit Abomination or the Flame Spire Phoenix does. Even though I kind of hate abilities like that, they do emulate tabletop well. You know, Tyrion has it with the Heart of Avalor, and the Hell Pit Abomination has it, Flame Spire Phoenix has it. It can be a little frustrating to deal with sometimes, but I mean, it is a counterable mechanic if you're just paying attention. So maybe they'll do something like that, where they're able to basically, if they get really low on health, they get like a chance for one of the sisters to like resurrect the other one, so they get like a big buff to their health back. Not 100% sure on that one. I'm sure it will be represented somehow, and it will probably be a heal. I'm just not sure what exact kind of mechanic they're going to go with it. Then, of course, we've got to talk about their mounts. So, why would you take one over the other? So first you have Gwyndolor, who in tabletop I think was just flat out better than the dragon. Gwyndolor is not only just a Great Eagle mount, which is awesome because he's the only named Great Eagle mount I'm aware of in tabletop, at least off the top of my head, but Gwyndolor is also actually the he's like Great Eagle royalty, because Great Eagles, are very intelligent and have their own culture, and they can like speak with elves if you understand the language of the Great Eagles. Like, they have a really long history with the elves. And Gwyndolor is actually like a direct descendant of the King of Eagles. So he's a big boy. And important. So I'm really, really excited to see him. But his buff was called Hunter's Mount. And Hunter's Mount in tabletop was amazing, because it allowed Nyastra and Arahan to reroll all failed to hit rolls when shooting. So I imagine in Total War Warhammer, I'm thinking the mounts are where the active buffs are going to come from, because you can't have their magic items be active buffs, because that's just how they shoot, you would kind of think. But then again, they kind of did that with Elithanar, and Wolfric, now that I think about it. But I think it'll be better to have the mounts do it. So, like, Hunter's Mount would be an active you have if you have Gwyndolor as your mount. And I would imagine if it's activated, it would probably just rapidly increase the accuracy and the reload rate of Nyastra and Arahan. So it'd basically be a buff, you pop it, and they're not only firing faster, but they could just maybe be freakishly more accurate, maybe get a missile damage buff too. Just something to make their shooting, like, super duper scary. That would be, I think, appropriate and really fun. And then you have Scythenhar, which I know I've said his name almost every single time, different every single time I've said it. But Scythenhar is really, really fun. He is not only a forest dragon, but he's probably one of the angriest forest dragons that exists. Actually, I would say he's the angry old man dragon. Because where most forest dragons tend to be more enigmatic, mysterious, kind of like, you would expect them to fight very tactically and cleverly with their poison attacks and breath weapons and using the force to their advantage. No, not Scythenhar. Scythenhar is all about just being a big damn bully. He has a unique rule called Impetuous, and I would have that be his big active. And Impetuous basically is just that Scythenhar just like slams himself into close combat without regard for his safety or the safety of the Sisters of Twilight, but he just starts wrecking shop in close combat. It was actually a debuff in tabletop, because it meant if you took the Forest Dragon mount, if you had the ability to declare a charge with Scythenhar, you had to like roll a leadership check to basically hold him back. Otherwise, he would just be like, yeah, screw you, I'm not listening to your orders, and would charge anyway. But, he's a dragon, so he has a breath attack and a really, really nice stat line. So I would really love for his ability, Impetuous, to maybe give like a really big charge bonus, maybe some weapon strength, just something that really is like, okay, now is the time to charge and just go slam dunk in close combat. I wouldn't give it like any big downsides like Rampage or anything, just because Creative Assembly has been pretty liberal at whenever they interpret a tabletop ability for like legendary lore characters, they almost always tend to remove the downsides, because a lot of these abilities had downsides in tabletop for balance reasons. But Creative Assembly was like, nah fam, that's dumb and not as enjoyable to use. So they almost always remove the downsides. But anyway, that's the Sisters of Twilight. Really, really excited to hopefully see them in the game. I will say for them, they're the ones that I'm really, really, really banking and hoping on getting them as the new playable Lord. But in any event, that's not the end of the video. We still have to talk about a couple of other things. So, and I will have timestamps. You'll probably have seen those, and I should probably add a note in somewhere else in the video, but there will be timestamps so you can skip around. So next up is who do I think one of the new characters will be for the Elves, a potential new character. And I'm going to go ahead in this video and cover the most obvious, being the Spellweaver. So for those unaware, Spellweavers are basically just Lord level wizards. Like where Spell Singers are the basic wizard for Athel Loren, and they handle a lot of like the day-to-day requirements. The Spellweavers operate as not only the most powerful wizards within Athel Loren, but they actually tend to operate as the diplomats as well. Like, whenever Wood Elves have to deal with another race and they send like a diplomatic envoy or something to talk to them, it is virtually always a Spellweaver that's sent to handle it. So I think there could be some interesting things done with that. Now, what do I think the Spellweavers will bring to the table? They don't have any like new unique rules, but they do bring new lores of magic. So the big thing is that there are two famous kinds of Spellweavers. There are High Weavers and Dark Weavers, and I'm sure you can guess why they're named that. Spell Singers, of course, can take any of the 8 battle lores, and I do very much hope that we will get access to new Spell Singers for free. So, you know, other lores of magic, because Wood Elves had all 8 of the battle lores. So hopefully we'll get some more Spell Singers. But the Spell Weavers were unique because they could wield high magic or dark magic. And that was like their big gimmick, was that you could take High Weavers or Dark Weavers. And it even actually has a funny note that they used to go to the battlefield in pairs, because essentially you'd have the Dark Weaver on the battlefield, like unleashing lots of scary sorcery and magic and stuff. And the High Weaver's job was not only, of course, to lend her magical might to the battlefield, but she would like constantly be watching the Dark Weaver, because if they started getting like too much magic, like they were building up too much power and were starting to like literally go insane, the High Weaver's job was to be like, and that's enough. And they would shunt off the winds of magic, because traditionally, unfortunately, Creative Assembly has not found a way to demonstrate this, and it's one of the biggest weaknesses of the magic system. But traditionally, the big thing about high magic is that high magic is generally all about controlling the winds of magic, and one of its big features is that high magic casters are really, really good at like turning it off. like causing the winds of magic to just snuff out so other wizards can't cast anymore. So like a High Weaver's job is literally like for a Dark Weaver to be going crazy on the battlefield, like almost like someone who's like getting pumped gasoline to use a flamethrower, and if they start getting a little too into it, the High Weaver cuts them off. Like they're like, and you've had enough. Why don't you calm down for a hot minute? But I think the big thing with them will just be that we will be getting access to them as a new lord, potentially getting access to them as a new lord type, and they will come with, I think we'll get a high magic and a dark magic variant. I don't think they're going to give us the other battle lores for the lord level. I think it'll be like, oh, if you want the lore of Beast, take Durthu. If you want the high magic, take an Ancient Tree Man. But if you want high magic or dark magic, take a Spellweaver, and then if you want any of the other lores, take a Spellsinger. So I think they're going to be high magic or dark magic only. I think there's a good chance they might come with a bow, because they were able to wield longbows in tabletop. I wouldn't bet on it, but there's a chance, which could be pretty interesting. And then for mounts, I think they'll keep them exactly like they were in tabletop, where in tabletop, the Spellweaver mounts were the Elven Steed, the Great Eagle, or the Unicorn, which personally, I'm always happy to see the Unicorn mount get some more representation. I really like Warhammer Unicorns, and I've always found it kind of a bummer that the only time you ever see them right now is as a mount for damsels. That's it. Like, not even a prophetess mount, just damsels. But, so anyway, that's it for the Spellweaver. Next up, I have 2 units that I would like to propose or introduce you to. The first is the Wildwood Wardens. Now, the reason I bring these guys up is twofold. One, I've been talking to a lot of Wood Elf players lately, and the amount of breath that the Wood Elf players use when talking, I'm not going to say complaining, but when expressing their concerns about fighting dwarves is amazing. Like, Wood Elf players hate dwarves. I would actually go so far as to claim that I'm pretty sure the reason we did not get a dwarf DLC for Total War Warhammer 2 is because Wood Elf, there is like hardcore Wood Elf fans somewhere in CA headquarters that have been burning and just waylaying and destroying any and all attempts to give us a Dawi DLC. We need to find these secret agents and root them out. ready to burn their forest down so that we can get some more dwarf content. But back to the wood elves. The reason they tend to hate dwarves so much is because they don't really have reliable armor piercing that does not also do magic damage. And I think this would be the best way to give them that, so that it's available to their roster. Because that, that should be something they have as an option. Just so if they're going up against hardcore magic resistance, they're not just getting completely dicked over by it. So what would Wildwood Rangers entail? Well, Wildwood Wardens. So obviously they would be Wildwood Rangers on cocaine. So where Wildwood Rangers are an elite unit that don't have a lot of guys, but they have decent AP and they're more of like a skirmish formation thing, I would have Wildwood Wardens be like a super elite version of Wildwood Rangers. So maybe have just as many guys, if not a little bit more, but I would have them actually have like that really hardcore bark armor. So they would actually have like legit armor, not like a ton, but enough to help them stand out. So like they'd be like the wood elf version of heavy infantry. I'd have them carry, I think to have them stand out from carrying just the singular great axe that the Wildwood Rangers have, I would have them instead essentially carry two nasty looking honking 2 axes. So like with like really big picks off the back, so they still have that really armor piercing feel, but they stand out a little more. And I would have them be much more of a blender unit for dealing with infantry. So like have them be dual wielding these badass looking axes, and have them have a notable anti-infantry bonus, pretty solid AP, and just god tier stats when it comes to melee attack, melee defense, and leadership. Like they should just be holding the line and able to just cleave through groups of infantry. That way there's something that can like really contest fighting super heavy elites like Chosen or dwarves or black orcs or whatever in close combat, for wood elf players who want to be able to enjoy that experience. The other thing I would have is I would have them get a Guardian of the Wildwood ability that actually works. The one that the Wood Elves currently have is kind of butts, in my opinion. The Wildwood Rangers have it, but I would actually take this opportunity to rework it. Currently, it's if the Wildwood Rangers are standing in a forest, they get anti-large and I think melee attack or weapon strength, one of the two. That's super specific and pretty dumb, because virtually no one's going to accept your fight in a forest. I would actually change the way it works to the way it's supposed to work, which is that Guardians of the Wildwood is supposed to be that if they are being affected by fear or terror, so they're like in range of a unit that causes fear or terror, that it should then give them that buff. So like you can keep the buff the same, where it gives you anti-large and extra melee attack or whatever it is currently in live, but it should be triggered instead if they are just in, like if they are in range of a unit that causes fear or terror to where it affects them, like they're within its area of influence, their buff is active. Just do that. Just like, even if we don't get this unit, just do that for the regular Wildwood Rangers. I really don't like what they did with the Wildwood Rangers needing the forest to have their buff. That was so dumb. Anyway, enough on that. The next unit I want to talk about are, of course, the Zoats. So Zoats are a really popular unit right now in the discussion about the upcoming Wood Elf DLC. I'm honestly not sure why. Like, I do see Zoats as a very realistic possibility, but I don't know why the community is so, like, fastened on them. There's so many unit options for the Wood Elves, because CA has this funny habit of just turning, like, unit champions into completely brand new units, which is where I got, like, the Wildwood Wardens from. But Zoats, we'll talk about them. So what a Zoat is basically they are these very ancient primordial creatures that we don't know a lot about them. Like, we don't know how long they've been on the world. We don't know where they came from. We don't know whose side they're on or what their objectives are. They're very mysterious. And from what I can tell from what research I've done about them, it seems that they are a race the Old Ones created, likely to be the babysitters of the forest. Because there was a time, a long time ago, where the Old Ones created Athel Loren. Like, the Old Ones were the ones who basically used their powers and science and magic to seed the life that would one day grow into Athel Loren as, a sentient forest that can defend itself and grow arms and legs and is really spooky. Zoats were likely, in my opinion, the evidence I think suggests that Zoats were probably then created either right before or right after that, and the Old Ones told them, you are babysitting this is your job now. Like, defend the forest. Because the Zoats have this really intrinsic relationship with, like, forests and tree plant life that does not exist very naturally in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. Like, those are almost always things that the Old Ones created to have that. But in any event, they are centauroids, meaning that, they have an upper body that's humanoid and then a lower body that has, like, is animalistic and has 4 legs. But their entirety is like lizard. Like, they basically look like if you took a dragon ogre and instead of giving it a upper body of an ogre, you just were like full lizard man mode and just called it a day. But they're really, really cool looking, and I'll show you a picture. Obviously, I'll have pictures going, but they have these big old stone mauls that allow them to just curb stomp people in close combat. And that being said, they're not as big as a lot of people I think they are. They're about the size of a dragon ogre. Not a dragon ogre Shaggoth, a dragon ogre, so like the unit. Now, there are 2 ways they could implement them, I think. I think they could either bring them in as... I don't think they're going to do them as characters. Like, they were characters in the Storm of Magic, but I don't know. They just don't fit the character role in the Wood Elf roster, in my opinion. But I could see them doing one of 2 things. I could see them either just upgrading them to be a unit, so that they're made into a unit, or that has like bound spells, which we'll get into magic in a minute, or I could see them being something kind of like a Grail relic, where they're still a unit, but they like have unique buffs and operate alone, kind of like a pseudo character. That way they're not like actual characters, and they're not taking up your hero slots and stuff, and you don't recruit them in the normal fashion, but they still come off as like an elite unit and some other fun shenanigans. So, but as far as like how they work, they're very, very fast. They're decent combatants. They are much more about being tanks than damage dealers. Like, even though they have those big badass mauls, they don't actually count as great weapons, at least in tabletop. And in tabletop, those big old hammers they're holding are called sky staves. Sky staves? Stave. They are not great weapons, despite their appearance. You would think a giant freaking stick with a huge stone on the end of it would like count as a great weapon, but you'd be wrong, apparently. That being said, whether as a unit or an individual, I think they would be all about being super duper tanky. Like, they were very tough in tabletop. They have magic resistance, which is really cool. They have forest rider, so they would have the woodsman keyword and attribute in Total War Warhammer, so they can move through forests without penalty and would like move through the trees and stuff. And but like they're not known for being like good fighters in aggressive sense. Like, they're very good at holding the line because they're really tough, but they're not crazy strong, and they're not the best fighters. Like, they don't have a lot of attacks and stuff. So they'd probably like have rather lumbering attack animations, but would just like keep your opponent locked down. I think they'd have a super good leadership stat because they were cold-blooded in Warhammer Fantasy, and they had pretty good leadership, so they were just like Lizardmen. They would just keep fighting forever. So I think that they will like have a really solid, stout leadership stat. And then the big thing about them is that they're life wizards. They actually have the ability to cast life magic. And I think, I honestly don't think the Wood Elf roster needs more life wizards. Like, we've already got Ancient Treemen, Dryads know a decent amount of life magic spells, and the Spell Singers of Life exists. That's why I don't see these guys being a hero. I think it would be much more potent and powerful for them to instead be like a Grail Relic, or maybe just a unit that instead has either it's able to cast spells, which I think would be kind of dumb because it would be taking away from your rather precious ones of magic, or they just have bound spells. I would just give them bound spells where they like know either every spell from the Lore of Life, but maybe they can only cast it once, or maybe just give them a couple spells, but they can cast it a couple times, or like a decent amount of times. And then they should come with 2 new special rules. The first should be called the Power of the Deep Woods, which the Power of the Deep Woods is basically just like the Blessing of the Ancients for the Wood Elves. I would just have it where if a Zoat is standing in a forest, he generates Winds of Magic for his faction. Because the Power of the Deep Woods was literally just, if a Zoat is standing in a forest, he gets bonus to casting. So I would just in Total War Warhammer rework that as, if a Zoat is standing in a forest, he provides, like, he helps regenerate your Winds of Magic. Or maybe instead of like adding to the power pool, he just allows you to pull from your pull faster. That way he's not like giving you more magic, he's just allowing you to have access to your full magical pool faster. That could still be pretty strong without being just like broken. And then his other one, which I really, really like, is called Master of the Vengeful Forest. Which basically, the way this worked is in the lore, they describe it as Zoats have like an intrinsic ability to command plant life. So like the way a Zoat would fight you, actually, because they're not that great of combatants, what they actually tend to do to try and fight you is using their weight, obviously, and their size, they try and knock you over with their sky staves, which are those big old mauls they're carrying. And then, or just by using their tails or their bulk, whatever, they try and knock you over. And then the second they knock you over, they immediately like command the plant life around them for like roots and vines to come tearing up through the earth, to wrap around your neck and your limbs and stuff, and just choke you to death while pulling you into the earth, which is nightmare fuel, but a very effective way to kill someone if you have that ability. So the way I would have that work in Total War Warhammer is it could either be an ability they have, or that like maybe they're able to essentially cast the Curse of Anrahir from the Lore of Beasts. Like they basically like cast, or like maybe it could just be Dwellers Below. Like it's something similar to Dwellers Below, but maybe it's not quite as powerful. Or maybe it's like just an aura they're able to drop that deals damage over time to everybody that's standing in it, or just slows people down and gives them some debuffs. Alternatively, a thing it could do, which would be really, maybe a little too niche, but would be really thematic and cool, would be if maybe if a Zoat is fighting in a forest, he causes, like, direct damage over time around him. So you know how, like, how the Mortis engine has that AoE aura where it deals damage to anyone while it's in close combat? Maybe the Zoat could do that, but it's when he's in a forest. I don't know. That could be interesting. That might be a little too niche. It might need to be changed to just when he's in battle. But if they did that, it would have to be a very weak damaging ability, so that it's not overpowered. Because a lot of people hate that Mortis Engine ability, even though I don't think it's really that bad because you can just blow it up. But anyway, the last thing we're going to talk about in this video is a new mechanic that I think could be possible. So the first new mechanic I think that is worth talking about are seasons. Now, I don't think that it will be possible, or in CA's wildest interest, to create literal seasons where like every single race has a calendar where it's like fall, winter, summer, spring, and it like changes the weather and shit where you're at. Like that just seems like a lot of work. And you'd have to like figure out like what places would actually have seasons. Some places really wouldn't. Like if you're in the tropics, they don't really have seasons. It's just like hot and less hot, or rainy and less rainy. But so I think what they could do for the Wood Elves though is give the Wood Elves exclusive seasons. And the way it would work for the Wood Elves is basically like they would have their seasons constantly going, and you would get different buffs and maybe debuffs depending on the season. and that would be like an active part of your campaign that you would need to keep track of and like pay attention to, because you could like time really big important events depending on what season it is or what season it's about to be. So for instance, maybe it could be like if you're in spring triggers the wild hunt. So you immediately have the wild hunt active, which is giving like a lot of crazy buffs to your armies and making them really, really aggressive. But it makes it so that like maybe income and public order are down because the forest is like exploding into frenzied activity and everyone's like super warlike and not focused on doing anything at home, and they're all like running around massacring things. Maybe it could result in like I don't know, other like super nasty stuff. I'd have to, that's, you know, it's just spitballing. You know, in winter, it could be maybe in winter all of the forest spirits have a debuff to their, like maybe they have slightly less vigor, or maybe they just like they take some combat penalties, but you have increased public order. You have like recruitment buffs for elves because the elves are kind of dominating the forest because they have to protect it. Maybe you deal like vastly increased attrition damage to enemies that try and invade during the winter season, or, you know, random stuff like that. And then like in summer you could have increased replenishment and like super crazy amazing buffs for all your forest spirits. You know, it could be like the forest spirits are going wild because they're you know, they've calmed down a little bit from the frenzied wild hunt of spring, but they're still like really powerful and stuff. You know, just stuff like that. I would love for Athel Loren exclusively, not Athel Loren, sorry, Wood Elves exclusively, you know, beyond Athel Loren, to have access to seasons, so that maybe just their forest maps actually do have seasons. So you could see Athel Loren maps with winter or spring or fall, like with the trees change color and stuff. That might be too much work, but you know, just an idea. And then of course like different buffs and issues that you've got to worry about and handle and plan for. I could see some people maybe not liking that mechanic because it's like a little too involved or requires too much effort, but like I said, just spitballing. I think that would be super cool and interesting. But that's going to do it for today's video. Hope you all enjoyed it. I expected this to maybe be 15 minutes, so of course it's 45 minutes because I have no control over my life and everything is falling apart around me. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. I will be back tomorrow, the day after that, and the day after that with the remaining ones. So tomorrow we'll tackle Ariel and some other, a new character option, new units, new mechanic. Same thing for Erloth, same thing for Nyeth. So if you want to see all of them, like you want to figure out everything I'm going to talk about, you're going to have to tune into every video. In any event, hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you around. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.